He had built empires out of glass and steel. Towers that scratched the sky bore his name, whispered with admiration in the circles of wealth and power. To the world, Victor Hale was the embodiment of success. A billionaire, untouchable, driven. A man who seemed to have mastered every negotiation and bent the markets to his will. But what the glossy magazines and sharp-tongued journalists never caught was the silence of his mansion at night, the soundless corridors where portraits hung like judges, and the loneliness that followed him through every deal closed and every fortune multiplied. Victor's life was scheduled down to the minute. Meetings, flights, dinners with investors, everything meticulously orchestrated. There was no room for accidents, no space for disruption. Until his son, Daniel, came into the picture. Daniel was born with special needs, and while Victor loved him with the fierce instinct of a father, he didn't always know how to show it. To him, love had always been proven through achievement, through providing, through making the world safe with wealth. But Daniel's world didn't bend to money or power. It required patience, tenderness, and presence, currencies Victor often lacked. The boy's mother had left years ago, overwhelmed by the strain of living in a household where emotions were sidelined for efficiency. Since then, Victor had filled the gaps with staff. Nannies, tutors, therapists, and an army of employees who ensured his mansion ran as smoothly as his businesses. Among them was Elena, a maid whose presence went almost unnoticed at first. She was quiet, diligent, and unassuming, blending into the background the way many in her position learned to do. But Daniel noticed her. Children always sense the hearts that truly see them. Elena came from a life of scarcity that stood in stark contrast to the luxury surrounding her work. Her hands were calloused from years of labor, her back accustomed to bending, her eyes seasoned with hardships most in the mansion would never comprehend. But when she looked at Daniel, she didn't see a billionaire's child. She saw a boy, fragile, curious, easily frightened but eager to be loved. She found ways to connect with him, small at first, folding towels into animals to make him laugh, singing softly while she cleaned, teaching him to count with the rhythm of her broom strokes. Victor rarely noticed. He was always rushing, tethered to his phone, his mind elsewhere. But Daniel noticed. He would follow Elena with his eyes, wait for her songs, anticipate her presence. Slowly, she became a steady anchor in a life that often felt confusing and overwhelming for him. And then came the day everything changed. It started like any other morning. Victor pacing in his study, scanning through contracts while sipping a coffee gone cold. Daniel played in the garden under the watchful eye of a caretaker, and Elena dusted the grand staircase, her thoughts drifting between tasks. The mansion seemed wrapped in its usual rhythm, but danger has a way of creeping in silently, unnoticed until it stands at the threshold. The gardener had left a side gate ajar, a small oversight in a property so vast that security usually seemed impenetrable. On the other side of that gate, down the winding lane, a delivery truck rattled past too quickly, brakes squealing faintly at the curves. Daniel, curious and restless, noticed the open gate. He wandered closer, drawn by the sunlight outside the boundary he rarely crossed. The caretaker, momentarily distracted by a buzzing phone, didn't see him slip through. Elena did. She had just stepped onto the landing above when she spotted Daniel's small frame darting past the fountain, heading straight for the open gate. Her heart lurched. In a blur, she dropped the duster, sprinted down the stairs with a speed born not of training but of instinct. By the time she reached the courtyard, Daniel was already halfway to the road. She shouted his name, her voice cutting through the quiet morning like glass. The boy froze for half a second, startled, but then kept moving, unaware of the danger beyond. The roar of the delivery truck grew louder, closer. Elena's legs burned, her chest heaved, but she didn't hesitate. She surged forward, arms outstretched, and just as Daniel's small foot touched the gravel outside the gate, she lunged. The force of her grab sent them both tumbling onto the grass, the truck blasting past with a deafening horn. For a moment, silence. Only the fading rumble of the truck and the quickened thud of two hearts beating in sync. Elena clutched Daniel tightly, shielding him with her body, whispering soothing words in Spanish under her breath. He clung to her, trembling, not fully understanding what had almost happened, but sensing that she had just pulled him from the jaws of something terrible. From the study window above, Victor had seen it all. His pen dropped from his fingers, clattering onto his desk. For the first time in years, the billionaire found himself speechless, his world reduced not to numbers or contracts, but to the sight of a maid, his maid, risking everything for the child he loved yet didn't always know how to protect. Victor didn't rush outside right away. For a moment he stayed frozen at the window, his mind waging a battle between disbelief and recognition. The scene replayed in his head. Daniel sprinting toward danger, Elena diving after him, the screech of tires, the horn, the near disaster. His entire empire, every deal, every skyscraper, every billion, felt meaningless in that instant, because none of it could have stopped that truck. None of it could have pulled his son out of harm's way. Only she did. By the time he reached the garden, Elena was still kneeling in the grass, holding Daniel close. The caretaker babbled excuses, pale and trembling, his phone forgotten in the dirt. Victor barely heard him, his eyes fixed on Elena, the maid whose presence he had overlooked 1,000 times. She was trembling, strands of dark hair clinging to her damp forehead, but her grip on Daniel was steady, protective, unyielding. For the first time, Victor saw her not as staff but as a guardian. "Elena!" His voice cracked in a way that startled even him. He knelt down, his tailored suit brushing against the grass. Daniel looked up at him with wide eyes, still clutching Elena's arm as if letting go would mean falling back into danger. Victor reached for his son, but Daniel hesitated, his small fingers refusing to release the maid's sleeve. That hesitation cut Victor deeper than any hostile takeover ever had. The billionaire swallowed hard, forcing composure back into his tone. "You saved him." Elena shook her head quickly. "I only did what anyone would." "No," Victor interrupted, his voice low but firm. "Not anyone. You." The words lingered between them, raw and undeniable. He wanted to say more, but Daniel's sudden sob broke the silence. Victor gathered his son into his arms at last, feeling the boy's heartbeat against his chest. Yet even as Daniel pressed his face against his father's shoulder, one small hand still stretched back toward Elena, searching for her reassurance. Later, the mansion buzzed with fallout. The caretaker was dismissed on the spot, security protocols were reviewed, and the staff whispered in hushed tones about what had happened by the gate. But Elena slipped back into her duties with quiet modesty, as if she hadn't just risked her life for the child of a billionaire. She polished silver, folded linens, and carried herself with the same unassuming grace. Yet something had shifted in Victor. He found his gaze following her whenever she entered a room. He noticed things he had never paid attention to. The way her back straightened with pride despite the menial tasks, the gentle patience in her voice when Daniel fussed, the quiet strength in her hands. She didn't move like someone trying to impress or earn favor. She moved like someone who had weathered storms far greater than dust or spilled wine, someone who carried dignity in every step. One evening, after Daniel had been put to bed, Victor called Elena into his study. She came hesitantly, her apron neatly folded, her eyes cautious. The study was a cathedral of wealth. Mahogany shelves, leather chairs, a fireplace that burned more for ambience than heat. She looked out of place there, yet somehow, she brought a grounding presence the room had never known. "Please sit," Victor said, gesturing to a chair. Elena remained standing. "Sir, if this is about earlier, I truly don't." "It is," he cut in. "And I need you to understand something. You didn't just save my son's life. You reminded me what life is." Her brows knit together in confusion. She had expected gratitude, maybe even a reward. But this sounded like confession. Victor leaned back, his gaze heavy. "For years, I've believed protection meant building walls, buying safety, hiring the best. I thought my money could shield him from everything. But I was wrong. All the gates, all the guards, none of it mattered. In the end, it was you, someone I barely noticed, someone I never truly thanked. You risked yourself for him without hesitation. That means more than I can measure." Elena lowered her eyes, uncomfortable under the weight of his words. He's a child, a beautiful child. No one should ever hesitate to protect him. Her humility struck him harder than if she had demanded a fortune, because she could have. In his world, favors were currency and every act of loyalty came with a price tag. But Elena wasn't negotiating. She was simply speaking the truth. Over the next days, Victor watched Daniel grow even more attached to Elena. The boy's laughter returned quicker when she was near. His tantrums softened at her voice. At night, when Victor tried to read him a story, Daniel would glance toward the door, waiting for the footsteps of the maid who made him feel safe. It stung, but it also opened Victor's eyes. For the first time, he understood that love wasn't about grand gestures or lavish gifts. It was about presence, sacrifice, and heart. And as he lay awake in the silent mansion, staring at ceilings too high and rooms too empty, Victor realized something terrifying. He, the billionaire, had everything except the one thing Elena seemed to carry without even trying. The following weekend, Victor decided to cancel a string of business trips. His assistants were baffled. Some contracts had been months in the making, and shareholders expected his presence. But Victor waved it off. "Send the deputy," he ordered, his tone final. For the first time in years, he was choosing his son over his empire. Daniel noticed. Children always do. He clapped when his father joined him for breakfast, though Victor barely knew how to navigate the mess of cereal and spilled milk. Elena, standing quietly by, caught the faint smile tugging at the billionaire's lips, a smile the world never saw. But the real shift came when Victor began watching how Elena interacted with Daniel. She didn't treat him like porcelain. She didn't hover nervously or pity him. Instead, she encouraged him, challenged him, met him where he was without making him feel less than. When Daniel struggled to tie his shoes, she knelt beside him patiently, guiding his fingers rather than doing it for him. When he grew frustrated, she steadied him with calm words until triumph lit his face. Victor stood in the doorway, silent, humbled, realizing he had never once given his son that kind of patience. One afternoon, a storm rolled across the estate. Rain hammered the windows, thunder rattled the walls. Daniel grew restless, his anxiety heightened by the clamor outside. Victor tried distracting him with a tablet game, but the boy shoved it away, tears brimming. Elena entered quietly, humming a tune in Spanish. She pulled Daniel close and began to dance with him in the living room, swaying gently, whispering that storms pass, that even the loudest thunder fades. Slowly, his trembling eased. His laughter returned. Victor watched, struck by the intimacy of the moment. Elena had turned chaos into calm without wealth, without gadgets, only with love. And in that instant, he realized his empire had taught him how to command, but not how to comfort. Later that night, he found Elena tidying the study. He lingered by the doorway before speaking. "You know," he said quietly, "you've done more for my son in a few weeks than I have in years." She looked up, startled. "That's not true." "It is," he pressed, stepping inside. "I've built him a fortress, but you've given him a home inside it." Elena's hands froze around the stack of books she was arranging. She shook her head. "I'm just doing my job." "No," Victor said, his voice carrying the weight of revelation. "Your job is dusting shelves. What you're doing is raising my son." The words slipped out before he could measure them, and Elena's eyes glistened. She quickly turned away, unwilling to show too much. Over the next few days, Victor tested himself. Instead of handing Daniel to the tutors, he tried sitting with him during lessons. It was awkward, clumsy. He stumbled over instructions, grew impatient too quickly, but Elena's quiet presence guided him. She would give him a nod when Daniel needed encouragement, a shake of the head when he pushed too hard. Slowly, Victor learned. The staff noticed the change. The mansion no longer felt like a sterile hotel but something warmer, quieter. Whispers spread. The billionaire was different. More present, more human, but not everyone welcomed it. Some among the staff resented Elena's influence, muttering that she had overstepped, that she was exploiting the boy's attachment to secure her position. A senior housekeeper, Mrs. Cartwright, went so far as to approach Victor with a warning. "She's getting too close, sir," Cartwright insisted. "It isn't proper. Boundaries are important in a household like this." Victor fixed her with a cold stare, the kind that had once crushed boardroom opponents. "Boundaries nearly cost my son his life. Elena saved him. And until you've done the same, you will not speak against her." The message was clear. No one dared question it again. And yet, late at night, Victor wrestled with a question he couldn't shake. Why did Elena do it? Why risk herself for his son when she could have easily looked away, claimed she didn't see? Gratitude gnawed at him, but so did curiosity. What drove her? He would find his answer sooner than he expected. One quiet evening, after Daniel had fallen asleep, Victor found Elena in the kitchen, her hands red from scrubbing. He leaned against the doorway. "Sit with me," he said. She hesitated, wiping her hands on her apron. "Sir, Please," he added, softer this time. Reluctantly, she sat. For a while, silence stretched between them, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. Finally, Victor asked, "Why did you risk it that day? Why didn't you hesitate?" Elena looked down at her hands, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because I know what it's like to lose someone in an instant. I couldn't let you feel that pain if I could stop it." Victor frowned. "You've lost a child?" Tears welled in her eyes, shimmering in the dim light. "My little brother. He was 8. Car accident. I was supposed to be watching him. I turned away for one moment, and that was all it took." Her voice broke, and she covered her mouth. Victor's chest tightened. He had expected many things: ambition, self-interest, even blind duty, but not this. Not tragedy. Suddenly, her fierce protectiveness of Daniel made perfect sense. She wasn't just saving his son. She was saving herself from reliving a nightmare. In that kitchen, surrounded by silence and shadows, Victor understood something profound. Wealth had insulated him from many hardships, but it had also blinded him. Elena carried scars money couldn't erase, yet those scars had carved into her a strength and empathy he could never buy. And for the first time in decades, the billionaire felt small, not in failure but in humility. The next morning, Victor awoke before dawn. He lay in bed staring at the ornate ceiling, but his thoughts weren't on mergers or the stock market. They were on Elena's words from the night before. He couldn't shake the image of a younger version of her, broken on the roadside, haunted by guilt over a brother she couldn't save. That kind of pain left permanent marks. He wondered how many nights she had cried herself to sleep, how many years she had carried that invisible weight. And still, she had found the courage to risk her heart again for his son. It gnawed at him, not just gratitude, but responsibility. For once, Victor wanted to give back. Not through bonuses or checks. He knew instinctively that would insult her. He needed something deeper, something human. But what could a man like him, who measured his worth in profits, possibly give to someone like her? That question lingered as he walked the mansion halls later that morning. He found Daniel and Elena together in the playroom, building towers from colorful blocks. Daniel's laughter filled the room, the sound bright and unguarded. Elena smiled, gently letting him knock the tower over again and again. Victor stood quietly in the doorway, his heart swelling at the sight. It was rare, this joy, this simplicity. He realized he didn't want to just watch it, he wanted to be part of it. So he stepped inside. "Can I help?" he asked, surprising himself as much as them. Daniel's eyes lit up. He clapped his hands, urging his father to sit. Elena looked uncertain, but shifted aside to make space. Victor lowered himself to the floor, his expensive trousers creasing against the carpet. He picked up a block awkwardly, handed it to Daniel, and waited. The boy giggled, placing it carefully atop the growing tower. And for the first time, father and son built something together. Not out of steel and glass, but out of fragile, colorful pieces balanced with patience. The tower toppled again, and they all laughed. The sound startled Victor. When was the last time he had laughed like that, without calculation, without restraint? He couldn't remember. From that day forward, Victor made it a ritual. Each evening, he carved out time for Daniel. Sometimes they built towers, sometimes they read books, sometimes they simply walked the garden together. And always, Elena was nearby, her presence a bridge between father and son. But with this new closeness came a new fear, the realization of how much he had missed. For years, Victor had believed he was protecting his son by providing everything money could buy. Now he saw the hollowness of that belief. What Daniel had needed most was not more security cameras or tutors. It was him, his time, his patience, his love. The weight of that truth pressed heavily on Victor's chest. He confessed as much to Elena one evening, when Daniel had finally fallen asleep after a long day of play. They sat in the kitchen again, two unlikely confidants. "I wasted years," Victor admitted, his voice low, almost ashamed. "I thought I was doing the right thing, building walls, buying protection. But I wasn't present. I left him alone, even when I was in the same house." Elena looked at him gently, her dark eyes carrying no judgment. "Don't punish yourself forever. What matters is what you do now. He sees you trying. That means more to him than you realize." Victor nodded, but his throat tightened. "I'm not sure I know how to be the father he needs." Elena's lips curved in a faint smile. "You don't have to know everything. You just have to show up. Every day. The rest will come." Her words struck him like gospel. He realized he had spent his entire life mastering the art of control, but fatherhood wasn't about control. It was about presence. Still, something unsettled him. Elena's devotion, her quiet wisdom, her patience. He depended on it more each day, but dependence made him uneasy. He had built his empire by never needing anyone. And yet, here he was, leaning on a maid to guide him through fatherhood. That unease deepened when he overheard two board members whispering at a gala weeks later. "Hale's distracted. Spends more time at home now. They say the maid practically runs the household." The words stung not because they were cruel, but because they were true. That night, after returning from the gala, Victor found Elena still awake, folding laundry by the fire. He sat across from her, the flicker of flames throwing shadows across his face. "They're saying I've changed," he murmured. She looked up, curious. "Have you?" "Yes," he admitted. "And I don't regret it. But they think it makes me weak. Vulnerable." Elena studied him for a long moment. Then she said quietly, "If loving your son makes you weak, then maybe the world needs more weakness." The words hit him like a thunderclap. For years, Victor had measured strength in dominance, in winning. But here was a woman with no fortune, no power, no influence, teaching him that true strength was in compassion, in risking vulnerability. He didn't reply. He couldn't. He just sat there, staring at her, realizing how much she had altered the very foundation of his life. And somewhere in the depths of his chest, a dangerous thought stirred. What if she wasn't just saving his son? What if she was saving him too? Spring arrived, and with it, a warmth that seemed to seep not only into the gardens but into the walls of the mansion itself. Victor found himself waking earlier, not with dread for another day of corporate warfare, but with anticipation. Anticipation of breakfast with Daniel, of watching him discover something new, of the quiet moments where Elena's presence made the world feel less hollow. But change rarely comes without resistance. One afternoon, Victor's sister, Margaret, came to visit. She was a sharp woman, her features polished by the same privilege that had shaped Victor, though her eyes carried a constant scrutiny. She had always prided herself on maintaining the family's image, on keeping appearances tidy in the elite circles they moved in. Margaret wasted no time in voicing her concerns. Over tea in the solarium, she leaned across the glass table and lowered her voice. "Victor, I hear unsettling things. People are talking. They say the maid has become too involved." Victor stiffened. "Her name is Elena, and she saved Daniel's life." "Yes, yes," Margaret waved a manicured hand. "We're all grateful, but gratitude has limits. A servant should know her place. This attachment is unhealthy. For Daniel, for the household. For you. The words ignited something in Victor. A younger version of himself might have nodded along, seeing sense in her cold logic. But now he slammed his palm on the table, rattling the cups. Do not ever diminish what she's done. She's given my son more love than I ever managed. If that makes you uncomfortable, then perhaps it says more about you than her. Margaret recoiled, shocked. In all their years, she had rarely seen her brother lose composure. But this time it wasn't anger born of ego. It was anger born of conviction. Later, Victor found Elena in the kitchen, unaware of the heated exchange. She was teaching Daniel how to crack eggs into a bowl, laughing softly as yolks spilled across the counter. The sight disarmed him. After Margaret's harsh words, Elena's tenderness felt like a quiet rebellion against the coldness of their world. And yet Margaret's warning lingered. Not because he agreed, but because he feared it might be true. Was he leaning too much on Elena? Was Daniel? What would happen if one day she wasn't there? That fear gnawed at him until one night he asked her directly. Elena, he began, his voice hesitant. Do you ever think of leaving? Of finding another job? She blinked, startled. Leaving? Why would I? I don't know, he admitted. You're young. You deserve more than cleaning up after people like me. You deserve. He trailed off, unsure how to finish. Elena's expression softened. What I deserve isn't about wealth, Mr. Hale. It's about peace. And for the first time in years, I found some here. Your son gives me that. So no, I don't plan on leaving. Relief washed over him, though he masked it with a nod. I see. But that night, lying awake, he realized something terrifying. He didn't just fear losing her because of Daniel. He feared losing her because she had become part of him too. The truth crystallized weeks later during a crisis. Daniel fell ill with a high fever. Panic rippled through the mansion. Doctors were summoned, medication administered, but Victor felt helpless, pacing the halls like a lion trapped in a cage. His son's face was flushed, his body trembling, and nothing seemed to break the fever. Elena stayed by the boy's side all night, a cool cloth in her hand, whispering lullabies to soothe him. Victor watched from the doorway, his chest aching. At one point, Daniel stirred, his fevered eyes searching the room. Papa, he whispered weakly. Victor rushed to his side. I'm here, son. I'm here. But Daniel shook his head slightly, his hand reaching instead for Elena. Mama, he murmured, drifting back into fevered sleep. The word shattered Victor. It wasn't just a slip. It was truth from the depths of a child's heart. Daniel saw Elena as the mother he had lost, the anchor he had needed. Victor stepped back, tears pricking his eyes. It should have stung, but instead, it humbled him. For the first time, he wasn't jealous of Daniel's attachment. He was grateful, because in Elena, his son had found something money couldn't replace. When the fever finally broke at dawn, relief swept the household. Victor found himself standing in the kitchen, exhausted, staring at Elena as she brewed coffee. She looked equally drained, her hair loose, her eyes heavy, but her strength was unshaken. Thank you, Victor said simply, for being what I couldn't. Elena looked at him quietly, then shook her head. You were exactly what he needed last night. You were there. That's all he asks of you. Victor's throat tightened, and in that moment he realized Margaret was wrong. It wasn't unhealthy for Elena to be so close. It was salvation for Daniel and maybe for him too. The days that followed Daniel's illness marked a turning point. Victor found himself waking with a new urgency, not for the stock market, not for acquisitions or boardroom battles, but for life at home. He began arriving earlier, leaving later, not because anyone had instructed him to, but because he wanted to be present, to watch Daniel grow, to witness the moments money could never buy. Elena noticed immediately. She greeted him one morning with a small smile, quiet but knowing. You're here early, she said, as if remarking on the weather. Victor returned her smile, hesitant but genuine. I thought I'd try staying a while, with him, and so he did. Each day became a series of small rituals. Helping Daniel dress, joining him in the garden, reading bedtime stories without glancing at his phone. It was awkward at first. Victor fumbled through words, mispronounced storybook names, stumbled over the simplest instructions. Yet, Elena's presence beside him was steady, a silent guide. Her patience showed him the rhythm of fatherhood, the gentle cadence needed to nurture a child who required more than ordinary attention. The mansion staff began to notice the change. Rooms that had once been filled with quiet efficiency now resonated with laughter. The house itself seemed to breathe differently, lighter somehow, warmer. Whispers circulated. The billionaire was softening. Some were skeptical, some amused, but no one dared interfere. Not after seeing what Elena had done and what she continued to do. One afternoon, Victor watched as Daniel tried to climb a small tree in the garden, determination etched on his young face. His hands fumbled the branches. His legs shook with effort. Elena knelt nearby, ready to catch him if he fell, but she didn't intervene immediately. Instead, she encouraged him gently, whispering tips and reassurance. Daniel listened, then tried again. His hands gripped tighter. His legs pushed harder. And finally, with a triumphant squeal, he reached a low branch. Victor's chest swelled. He realized then that what Elena had been teaching all along wasn't just patience or protection. It was empowerment. She had given his son the confidence to face challenges, to trust himself, to grow in ways Victor's wealth alone could never achieve. That evening, after Daniel had fallen asleep, Victor found Elena sitting quietly on the back porch, staring at the stars. He approached slowly. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice careful. She looked up. "About everything," he admitted. "About him, about you, about me. I've spent so much time trying to control the world, trying to protect everything with money and power. And yet, it took you, someone I barely noticed, to show me what real protection and love looks like." Elena's eyes softened, but she remained quiet. She had heard such confessions from men like him before, men who believed wealth equaled insight. But Victor's words carried a weight she hadn't expected: humility, sincerity, the raw acknowledgement of past failure. "I want to change," he continued, his voice stronger now. "I want to be the father he deserves. Not just a provider, not just a name on a check. I want to be present. I want to learn. And I want to make sure you know how much you mean to both of us." Elena's breath caught. Her loyalty had always been selfless, but Victor's recognition, his acknowledgement, stirred something deeper. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she let the night stretch between them, letting the words settle. Victor realized, in that silence, that he was learning a lesson no boardroom could teach. That love, true love, required humility, courage, sacrifice, presence. And Elena embodied all of it, quietly, without fanfare, without expectation of reward. The next morning, he made a decision. He called his assistant, not to arrange another deal or flight, but to adjust his schedule so he could attend Daniel's therapy sessions, school activities, and even the small, seemingly trivial moments that define childhood. He wanted to be there, not as a boss, not as a billionaire, but as a father. Later, when Daniel tugged at his hand to show him a drawing he had made, Victor knelt down and studied it carefully. And Elena, standing nearby, watched him with a faint, approving smile. She had saved Daniel's life, yes, but now she was teaching Victor to live it fully, to embrace a kind of wealth that couldn't be counted in dollars. As the evening sun painted the mansion in shades of gold, Victor felt an unfamiliar but welcome sensation: gratitude. Not the fleeting gratitude of social etiquette, but deep, abiding thankfulness for his son, for Elena, and for the chance to rewrite the narrative of his own life. And in the quiet hum of the house, amidst laughter, whispered stories, and the soft footsteps of a child exploring his world, Victor understood that this bond, this family, was worth more than anything he had ever earned. Not everyone in Victor's world appreciated the change. News of his growing attachment to Daniel and Elena began to circulate quietly through the upper echelons of business circles. Gossip at board meetings, whispers in luxury lounges, even subtle remarks from longtime advisors. It all hinted at disapproval. People in Victor's orbit had grown accustomed to his ruthless efficiency, his laser focus on wealth and control. This warmth, this vulnerability was unexpected, and to some it was unsettling. Victor, however, was beginning to care little for what the world thought. His priority had shifted from empire building to presence, from acquisition to understanding, from power to love. But the murmurs persisted, and they carried weight. One afternoon, he received a terse call from one of his oldest investors, Gregory Tinsley. "Victor," Gregory's voice was clipped, professional. "I hear you're distracted lately. Family matters, I understand, but this is affecting operations. We can't have a CEO who's emotionally compromised." Victor's jaw tightened. "I'm fully aware of my responsibilities, Gregory, and Daniel is my responsibility." There was a pause, a brittle silence that crackled over the line. "Just don't let sentimentality interfere with business. You've built an empire. Don't let it crumble because of a child or a maid." Victor ended the call, anger simmering beneath the surface, but it quickly turned to reflection. Was he truly jeopardizing anything? Or were the fears of others merely a reflection of their own inability to understand what he had discovered? That wealth meant nothing if it could not protect what was most important. That evening, as he walked through the gardens with Daniel trailing behind, he spotted Elena tending to the roses, her hands steady, her face serene. Daniel ran to her, calling out excitedly about a butterfly he had spotted. Elena knelt, her voice gentle, guiding him through the discovery. Victor stopped to watch, heart pounding. He realized, once more, that Elena's influence extended beyond care. It shaped Daniel's curiosity, his confidence, his joy. Later, alone in his study, Victor reviewed contracts and reports, but his mind kept drifting back to the garden, to the laughter echoing under the fading light. He picked up his phone, scrolling briefly through messages from the board, then set it aside. The numbers could wait. What mattered, he realized, could not be quantified. But the tension wasn't gone. A few days later, a minor accident occurred in the kitchen. Daniel, curious as always, reached for a hot kettle. Elena, standing nearby, reacted instantly, pulling him back and preventing burns. The incident was brief, harmless, yet it ignited the board's latent fears when word reached them. Emails poured in, subtle warnings from executives. Safety protocols must be reinforced. Risk management must be our priority. Victor read them silently, then looked out at the family he had gathered in his home. Daniel, giggling over a spilled cup of milk, and Elena, patiently cleaning it up, her patience unwavering. He realized the world's notion of risk was different from his own. They measured it in dollars and reputation. He measured it in life and love. Determined to defend this newfound bond, Victor called a staff meeting. The mansion's senior members gathered in the grand hall, wary of his tone. Victor stood at the center, composed but firm. "Let me be clear," he began, voice echoing through the room. "Elena's role here is not just to maintain this house. She protects my son. She teaches him, and she has my trust completely. If anyone cannot accept that, then perhaps they are not fit to remain." Whispers of surprise filled the room. No one dared challenge him further. Elena, standing quietly at the back, felt a mixture of relief and unease. She had always acted selflessly, yet she understood that the world could be cruel to someone like her. A woman without wealth, whose courage now attracted scrutiny. Victor's gaze softened as he looked at her. "Thank you," he said simply, the words carrying the weight of all he could never repay. And that night, as Daniel slept peacefully, Victor sat alone in his office, reflecting on the journey so far. He understood now that life's greatest challenges weren't found in markets or mergers, but in the hearts we care for, the bonds we nurture, and the courage to protect what truly matters. A week later, the mansion felt different, heavier somehow, as if the world outside had pressed in with its judgment. Victor had hoped that his decision to prioritize his son and Elena would be respected, but whispers had a way of turning into consequences. A prominent journalist had caught wind of Daniel's near accident and Elena's heroic act. What was meant as private gratitude had become public speculation. Headlines ranged from "Billionaire neglects son," "Maid saves the day" to "New family dynamic." Maid becomes the real guardian. Victor's first instinct was fury. His son's life was not a story to be dissected. Yet, sitting in his study, he found himself thinking differently. He understood now that he could not control everything. Not the headlines, not the opinions, not even every outcome for Daniel. And perhaps, for the first time, he didn't want to. Still, the scrutiny brought its challenges. Investors became restless. Calls arrived, subtle threats interlaced with advice. "Victor, you can't let personal matters compromise the empire. Make sure your priorities are aligned." Victor considered it. For years, he had feared any deviation from control. But now, he saw that life was not a spreadsheet to balance, a market to dominate. Life was fragile, unpredictable, and yet more meaningful than profit sheets could ever capture. One evening, he confronted Elena in the kitchen. She was quietly washing dishes, the steam rising around her like a halo. "Elena," he said, his voice measured, "the world is watching. People are questioning your role, and mine." She looked up, calm and composed. "Then let them watch," she said softly. "You've already shown Daniel what matters. That's enough." Victor felt a wave of admiration mixed with unease. Her courage didn't falter, even under pressure. He realized that her bravery was not just physical, it was moral, ethical, unyielding. She protected Daniel not for praise, not for recognition, but because it was right. The following day, a confrontation arose in the boardroom. Gregory Tinsley, the old investor, made his point bluntly. "Victor, you're allowing a maid to influence your household, your child, and by extension, your decisions. This is unacceptable." Victor leaned forward, voice calm but firm. "Elena is not influencing my decisions. She is influencing life, my son's life, and I will not apologize for ensuring that he has the care, guidance, and protection he needs." A ripple of silence filled the room. Few dared to challenge him further. Victor realized that his definition of leadership had changed. It was no longer about asserting dominance or ensuring profit margins. It was about integrity, courage, and protecting what truly mattered. Later that night, Victor stood by the window, Daniel asleep beside him, Elena quietly folding clothes nearby. The mansion was silent except for the occasional creak of floorboards. And in that quiet, Victor reflected. He had spent decades building walls, both physical and emotional, around himself and his family. But Elena had shown him that walls cannot protect hearts. Only connection, care, and courage can. He made a decision. No more hiding, no more apologies. If the world wanted to judge him for choosing love over power, so be it. He would protect Daniel, support Elena, and embrace the humanity he had long ignored. And as he looked at the two most important people in his life, a calm determination settled in his chest. He realized that whatever storms came, criticism, gossip, disapproval, he would face them with the same courage Elena had shown the day she saved Daniel. Because for Victor Hale, true wealth was no longer measured in billions. It was measured in loyalty, love, and the courage to stand for what matters most. The following morning, Victor woke to a message that made his heart tighten. A high-stakes meeting with key investors had been scheduled to discuss his commitment to the company. The note implied that his recent focus on family and Elena had raised doubts about his leadership. He stared at the screen, the familiar weight of corporate pressure pressing down. But this time, it felt different. The empire he had built for decades suddenly seemed secondary to what he held closest. Daniel and Elena. He paced the study, glancing toward the playroom where Daniel and Elena laughed over a puzzle. The sound was a balm, reminding him of priorities beyond profit margins. For years, he had lived as though success was measured solely in acquisitions and figures. But now he understood that life's true victories could not be quantified. Victor knew what awaited him in that meeting. Arguments, veiled threats, and thinly disguised ultimatums. Investors feared weakness, feared unpredictability. But he had already discovered that love and presence were not weaknesses. They were courage in its purest form. Still, the decision weighed heavily. What if siding with his son and Elena came at a cost too high for his empire? He remembered the first day Elena had risked herself to save Daniel, the instant clarity in her eyes when she held him back from danger. That moment had changed everything. She had acted not out of duty, but instinct, empathy, and unwavering courage. And in that moment, Victor realized what true leadership looked like. Not commanding an office, but protecting life. The meeting room was intimidating, as expected. Faces he had known for years, some friendly, others barely disguising their skepticism, lined the table. Gregory Tinsley was there, poised, his expression a mix of concern and veiled disapproval. "Victor," Gregory began, "we need to discuss your priorities. Reports suggest you've been distracted. The company cannot afford to have its CEO divided." Victor held his gaze, steady and calm. "I am not distracted. I am focused on what matters most. My son, Daniel, and the people who protect and guide him. That includes Elena. She saved his life. And if you cannot respect that, then perhaps your understanding of leadership is limited." A tense silence followed. Murmurs ran through the room, but Victor pressed on. "I will not apologize for being a father. I will not compromise his safety, his growth, or the people who care for him. This company was built on vision, yes, but vision without humanity is hollow. I refuse to lead hollowly." Some nodded reluctantly, others frowned, but none dared challenge him further. Victor felt a surge of confidence, no clarity. For decades, he had equated control with strength, wealth with security. Now, he understood that true strength lay in protecting life, in nurturing love, in standing firm for what is right even when the world disapproves. That evening, he returned home to a quiet mansion, the sun setting in gold and pink streaks across the sky. Daniel ran to him, eyes bright with excitement over the day's discoveries, and Elena followed, her gentle presence a stabilizing force. Victor scooped his son into his arms, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "Papa!" Daniel exclaimed, hugging him tight. Victor looked at Elena, gratitude spilling from his chest. "We did it," he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. "We chose what matters most." Elena smiled softly, her eyes reflecting pride, relief, and a quiet triumph. She had taught him more than he could have imagined. That courage was not in wealth, but in the willingness to love fiercely and act without hesitation. And in that moment, Victor realized that no meeting, no investor, no whisper of the world could alter the truth he now lived. The family he protected, and the love he embraced, were worth more than anything he had ever acquired. The next week brought tension like never before. A local charity gala, which Victor normally attended as a symbol of his social influence, became a stage for scrutiny. Reporters had begun attending, subtly questioning the billionaire's focus on family over business. Some cameras lingered a little too long on Daniel, Elena, and Victor as they moved through the crowd. The whispers of investors and journalists alike were no longer private, they had gone public. Victor felt a tight knot in his chest as he guided Daniel through the grand hall, Elena holding his other hand. Daniel, oblivious to the undercurrents, laughed at a juggler performing nearby. Elena's calm smile was steady, but Victor noticed the tension in her posture. She, too, felt the weight of eyes and expectation. Then it happened. A particularly aggressive reporter approached, microphone thrust forward. "Mr. Hale, how do you justify spending so much time at home when your empire requires attention? Some say your company is at risk because of your personal choices." Victor froze for a heartbeat, the words slicing through the carefully constructed calm he had cultivated over decades. But then he looked at Daniel, looking up at him with trust and innocence, and at Elena, who had dedicated herself to protecting and nurturing his son. He smiled, calm and resolute. "I justify it with this," he said, sweeping his hand toward his son and Elena. "This is what matters most. Money, power, prestige, they are nothing without love, protection, and family. My empire may be vast, but my son's well-being is priceless. And anyone who cannot understand that has not truly learned the meaning of leadership." The reporter faltered, Words caught in his throat. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Victor stood taller. Pride mingled with humility. He had spoken not as a billionaire, but as a father, a man transformed by experience, by empathy, by courage. Later, in the quiet of the mansion, Victor reflected on the confrontation. He realized that protecting Daniel and standing by Elena had turned him into someone stronger than he had ever been. Strength was no longer about dominance or fear. It was about vulnerability, empathy, and decisiveness when it mattered most. Victor faced constant pressure from all sides. Investors issued subtle threats, questioning his focus and judgment, while board members whispered doubts about his decisions. Society's scrutiny was intense, and even among the staff, murmurs circulated regarding Elena's influence. Despite the chaos, Victor's priorities had shifted. Wealth and social expectations no longer defined him. His focus was now on protecting and cherishing the family he loved, Elena and Daniel. One evening, Elena approached him with calm certainty. "They don't see it the way we do," she said. "But that doesn't matter. What matters is here." She gestured toward Daniel sleeping peacefully. "And here," she touched her heart. Her words struck Victor profoundly. Courage wasn't about avoiding risk. It was about confronting the world and defending what truly mattered. Years of power and expectation had shaped him, but love and moral clarity were now reshaping his life. By the window, Victor watched the city lights flicker and reflected on control. He had once sought to master everything, but now he realized that only principles, integrity, and the safety of his family were truly worth guarding. With Elena nearby and Daniel's gentle breathing in the next room, Victor silently vowed that no challenge, threat, or disapproval could sway him. He would protect them and stand by them no matter what. Then came a call that made his heart race. Daniel had wandered into the mansion greenhouse and was unresponsive. Panic surged as Victor rushed through the halls. Inside, he saw Daniel dangerously close to rare plants, a glass vase teetering beside him. Elena was already there, moving swiftly to shield him. Fear and clarity struck Victor simultaneously. This was not a minor accident. It could have been disastrous. "Papa!" Daniel cried. Victor shouted, "Stay where you are." Every part of him was focused on safety. Elena guided Daniel away from danger, her bravery immediate and unhesitating. Victor realized that Elena's presence wasn't merely guidance. It was a shield. Once safe, Daniel clung to both of them, gratitude and relief mingling in his small frame. Elena's calm eyes met Victor's. Together, they had survived another test. Later, in the study, Victor admitted, "I can't keep him safe alone. No amount of money or security is enough." Elena's hand rested gently on his shoulder. "You're learning what it means to truly protect someone," she said. "You don't do it alone. That's why we're here, together." Victor's respect and gratitude deepened. Family, he understood, was defined by trust, courage, and the willingness to risk oneself for another. Elena had become his silent guardian, her bravery surpassing anything money could buy. As night fell and Daniel slept safely, Victor and Elena shared a quiet moment. Outside, judgment and criticism might rage, but inside their home, love and trust formed an unbreakable shield. Victor reached for Elena's hand, silently vowing to honor their bond and protect what mattered most. He had learned a lesson money could never teach: the value of courage, selflessness, and unwavering presence. Watching Daniel, he understood that true legacy wasn't wealth or power, but love that endures. The following week, tension escalated. A corporate rival exploited Victor's apparent distraction. Tampered cameras, unexplained disturbances, and whispered warnings tested the family's vigilance. Victor feared for no one but Daniel and Elena. Protecting them had become his highest priority. Elena, attuned to danger, moved through the mansion with precision, checking locks, adjusting cameras, and guiding Victor on preventive measures. Her instincts complemented his strategic thinking. Wealth alone could not safeguard Daniel. Intuition and trust were essential. Victor summoned his head of security. "Monitor every entry, analyze every pattern. No one comes or goes without my knowledge," he instructed. That evening, a nervous delivery truck parked too close to the mansion, a subtle reminder that threats could appear in small forms. Elena immediately noticed and neutralized the risk alongside Victor. These incidents permanently altered Victor's perspective. Appearances and public opinion could never outweigh the safety of Daniel and Elena. Vigilance, decisiveness, and courage became constants in daily life. That night, as he read Daniel a bedtime story, Victor felt profound gratitude. Elena had not only saved Daniel multiple times, but had taught him the meaning of courage, loyalty, and love. Victor reflected on the stakes. Outside forces would always challenge them, attempting to instill fear, but within the home, love and trust formed an unbreakable shield. For the first time, he felt certain that no wealth, power, or influence could replace the bond he shared with Elena and Daniel. Whispering, he said, "We're ready. Whatever comes, we face it together." In the days that followed, the mansion carried an eerie tension. Tampered security, disturbances, and unusual packages indicated escalation. Elena's instincts guided precautions, reinforcing Victor's confidence. One afternoon, Daniel wandered near the garden gates. A shadowy figure appeared. Panic surged, but Elena positioned herself between Daniel and danger. Her firm command caused the intruder to hesitate, demonstrating that her courage wasn't just protective. It taught Daniel bravery by example. Victor asserted authority. "This is private property. Leave now or authorities will intervene." The intruder retreated, underscoring a vital lesson. Love and vigilance weren't enough. Preparation, strategy, and decisive action were essential. Victor implemented layered security while ensuring Daniel's life remained joyful. That evening, watching Daniel play safely, he said to Elena, "He's fearless because of you. I can never repay what you've done." She replied, "You don't repay this. You protect what you love. That's what we do, together." Victor understood that life's true wealth lay in courage, loyalty, and protection. A storm arrived, literal and metaphorical. Heavy rain, wind, and a power outage heightened the tension. Movement near the perimeter triggered alarms. Elena guided Daniel to a safe room with instinctual precision, Victor following. Outside, chaos and danger collided. Elena directed security with unmatched skill, intercepting the intruder without harm. Daniel clung to her, trembling, and Victor felt profound gratitude. She had risked everything for love, not recognition. Afterward, Victor held Daniel while Elena prepared tea. The storm had passed. Victor looked at Elena, eyes glistening. "I don't know how I lived without you. You've changed everything. I've learned what courage and love truly mean. No danger will come between this family again." Elena smiled. "We're a team, always. That's what protects him and us." Victor's heart swelled. True completeness lay not in wealth or power, but in courage and the protection of what mattered most. As Daniel slept between them, he allowed himself to believe that safety, love, and happiness could coexist. The mansion, once a symbol of isolation and power, now stood as a testament to resilience, love, and unbreakable family bonds. Victor knew without doubt, no challenge, threat, or darkness could undo what they had built together.